Ever ordered a pizza with friends and had that moment where you're like, okay, how do we divide this fairly? It's like this weird thing. Humans seem hardwired to want things to be fair, but then figuring out what actually is fair,
Oh,
that's a whole other debate.
totally.
And that's what we're diving into today, this whole idea of fairness. Where'd it come from? How did it evolve? And why is it still so darn slippery to define?
It's a big one.
We're going full-on time machine today, ancient Greece to the present day.
Buckle up.
Exactly.
And speaking of snacks, metaphorical ones, promise. You had to start with Aristotle.
Oh, yeah, good old Aristotle.
Dude was wrestling with fairness back in the 4th century BC already. Saw it as part of distributive justice.
Yeah.
Basically, how do you divide stuff fairly in a society?
Distributive justice. Sounds fancy for arguing over who gets the last slice. So, what Aristotle say makes things fair?
His big idea was this. You treat equals equally and unequals unequally.
Okay, on the surface, that makes sense, I guess. But how do we even decide who's equal and who's not, and what's equal treatment anyway? Seems like a lot of wiggle room there.
Oh, totally. You've hit on it. That's where it gets interesting. Aristotle was all about balance. He even said moral excellence is concerned with passions and actions in which excess is a form of failure and deficiency a form of failure, while the mean is praised and is a form of success.
So it's not just everybody gets the same amount, but it's more like what's appropriate given what's going on, what people need. Like, should everyone pay the exact same taxes, or should those with more contribute more?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
See, Aristotle was onto something way back then. Fairness isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. It's got to be dynamic, got to change with the situation. What's fair in one situation might be totally unfair in another.
Okay, so that's ancient Greece kind of covered. But fast forward a bunch, now we're in the Middle Ages. Faith, religion, that's going to play a bigger role now, right?
100%. This is where natural law takes center stage, especially in Europe. Think of it this way. Fairness isn't just something we made up, some human rules.
Right. Yeah.
It's like an inherent right coming from something bigger than us, woven into existence itself.
So it's like fairness was built into the universe from the get-go, not just like humans decided one Tuesday.
Right. And that was huge because it meant fairness wasn't just about, like, splitting the loot, you know?
Right.
It was about moral obligations, recognizing everyone has inherent dignity just by existing. Really laid the groundwork for how we talk about human rights today, actually.
Wow, didn't give the Middle Ages enough credit. Okay, so if we're talking big thinkers of that era, got to bring up Thomas Aquinas, right? Vaguely remember him from school.
Oh, Aquinas, yeah, he was a giant. Took those Greek ideas, Aristotle and all that, and made them fit with Christian beliefs. Argued that this natural law, fairness included, wasn't some big mystery. Everyone could figure it out using reason.
So you've got like ancient logic meets medieval faith. Makes you wonder, did they tap into something fundamental back then about fairness being a right? Something maybe we've lost sight of a bit today? Something to think about. But we've got more history to unearth. Onwards to the Enlightenment. I'm ready for some fresh takes.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we went from these ancient Greek debates to like fairness being this big universal right in the Middle Ages.
All right.
Then boom, the Enlightenment hits. Revolutions everywhere, new ideas. How'd that shake up our view of fairness?
Man, the Enlightenment was all about shaking things up. Reason, individual rights, questioning everything.
Right.
And when it came to fairness, John Locke, Immanuel Kant, they really pushed things forward.
Okay, yeah, Locke, famous name, but give me the SparkNotes version. How'd he connect to this fairness idea?
Locke was all about individual liberty, believed every single person, just by existing, has inherent rights to life, liberty, property, and a fair society. He's got to protect those rights, no compromise.
So for him, no protecting those basic rights, your government isn't really fair, regardless of what else it does. Kind of echoes in how we see democracies today, doesn't it?
Totally. In fact, Locke's fingerprints are all over the American Revolution, the whole founding of the U.S.
Oh, interesting.
That emphasis on individual rights, government's got to be limited, the social contract would give up some freedoms, but in exchange for protection, order. That's his legacy.
Wow. So Enlightenment ideas straight up shaped how nations are run today. We touched on Immanuel Kant too, though. How's his take on fairness differ from Locke's?
So Locke was about individual rights, right?
Mhm.
Kant goes deep into morality, duty, all that.
Yeah.
His big idea was the categorical imperative, basically. A test for fairness that's universal. Like, imagine you're about to do something,
Okay, yeah.
and you ask, would I be cool with this if everyone always did it? If the answer is no, not fair. Simple as that.
So less about specific laws, more about holding yourself to a standard no matter what. Like, no cheating just because you benefit?
Exactly. It's recognizing what's fair for one, got to be fair for all. Forces you to think bigger than just what you want. Consider everyone else.
Man, makes you think. If everyone actually lived by that, wouldn't the one be radically different? Business, politics, everything.
Wouldn't it? That's philosophy, though, gives you the tools to think about these huge questions, how we structure the whole thing.
Right. Okay, so we've gone from these big heady debates to like the seeds of actual revolutions, modern government. But what about fairness in like normal life? How do these old ideas connect to how we actually experience fairness day to day?
And that's where it gets really wild. Because, yeah, we have these philosophical frameworks, but then there's psychology, how our brains are wired, how our cultures shape us.
Now you're speaking my language. Lay some psychology on me.
Ever notice how kids seem to have this, like, sixth sense for unfairness?
Oh, tell me about it.
Turns out it's not just them being difficult. Developmental psychologists, they've done studies. Even toddlers get fairness.
Toddlers. Seriously, they can barely string a sentence together.
I know, right? But it's true. They do these experiments. Toddlers work together on a task. Then they get unequal rewards. One gets a sticker, the other gets a whole sheet, for example.
Wow, poor kid who got gypped on the stickers.
Exactly. And their reaction, even if they can't put it into words, shows something's off. Like this understanding of fairness might be partly built into us. We're primed to spot it and get upset when it's missing.
So even before we learn any philosophy, there's a part of our brains that's like, hang on, this ain't right. That's wild. But if it's so ingrained, why is there still so much disagreement, so much conflict over fairness?
$1 million question, right? And that's where culture comes in. Our ability to sense unfairness, that might be universal, but how we define what's actually fair.
Ah, okay.
What counts as equal or unequal treatment, that's all about the cultures and societies that raise us.
Makes sense. What seems fair in one place might be totally off in another.
Exactly. Like some cultures, fairness is all about equality of outcome. Everyone gets the same reward no matter what they put in. Others, it's equality of opportunity. Everyone has a fair shot at it, even if the end results are different.
It's like that saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Or in this case, one culture's fairness is another's. You get the idea.
100%. And these cultural differences, they're everywhere. How we make laws, run our economies, even just how we treat each other day to day.
So we've got this potential biological thing, thousands of years of philosophers trying to figure it out, and our culture's all mixing in. My brain's kind of fried, honestly. Fried is an understatement. So we went from ancient philosophers to arguing toddlers, and turns out there's no easy answer for what fairness really is.
Nope, no easy answers.
So where do we even go from here? How does all this apply to, like, the real world, the 21st century, all its messiness?
You've hit on it. The challenge is taking these big ideas
Hmm.
and making them work in a world that's, well,
Complicated.
yeah. But there's some things to keep in mind can help us make sense of it all.
All right, lay it on me. What can we hold on to here?
One big one, fairness isn't about taking something away from someone to give to someone else.
Okay.
It's about making things so everyone has a chance to thrive.
So less about winners and losers, more like rising tide lifts all boats. But that's easier said than done, right?
Oh, for sure. Means we got to be flexible about what fairness even means. It's not a fixed thing.
Mm.
Even Aristotle was saying that way back when.
Right, right.
Like what's a fair shot for one person might be totally different for someone else, depending on where they started, what they've been through, all of it.
So much to think about. And that's just one-on-one. Zoom out to, like, global problems, climate change, inequality, who gets what resources. Fairness feels impossible to even define then.
It's daunting, yeah. But one of the articles you sent, it really stuck with me. It said, the future of fairness hinges on our ability to balance individual needs and aspirations with the collective good.
Oh yeah, that one hit hard. It's like, how do you let people chase their dreams, but not at the expense of others or the planet?
And that balance, that's the key. Knowing we're all connected, our choices impact others. Real fairness means thinking bigger than just ourselves.
Not exactly an easy task. Feels like it'd take a lot of empathy, understanding, actually listening to each other, especially folks whose lives are different from ours.
Exactly. Got to get past those gut reactions, actually talk to each other respectfully, even when it's tough. Because fairness is not a finish line we cross, it's a process.
I love that. We're all figuring it out together. So as we wrap up this deep dive, think about what fairness means to you. Where do you see that need for balance personal dreams versus the greater good, how history still affects us today. And maybe just by asking those questions, having those talks, remembering what these philosophers struggled with for centuries, maybe we can nudge things in a fairer direction. Thanks for going on this wild ride with us through history and into the heart of what fairness even means.
Exploring the concept of fairness, its origins and evolution. Fairness, a word that resonates with each of us, yet its meaning can be elusive. We all desire fairness, but how often do we stop to consider what it truly means? Today, we embark on a journey to explore the origins of fairness, how it has evolved throughout history, and its significance in shaping societies. Visual, the Parthenon of ancient Greece emerges, transitioning into a statue of Aristotle, with a quote attributed to him. The ancient beginnings. Our journey begins in ancient Greece, where fairness was tied to the broader concept of justice. One of the most influential thinkers on this subject was the philosopher Aristotle. He believed fairness was a crucial part of what he called distributive justice, the fair distribution of resources and benefits within society. Aristotle argued that fairness meant treating equals equally and unequal unequally in proportion to their differences. For instance, a person who contributes more to society should receive a proportionally greater share of its resources. But fairness, according to Aristotle, also involved a balance, a careful weighing of circumstances and contributions. Too much or too little in either direction, and fairness would give way to either excess or deficiency, both of which disrupt justice. In this sense, fairness wasn't a fixed idea, but a dynamic balance. It required judgment, wisdom, and context. Fairness in medieval and religious thought. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, where fairness took on a new dimension under the influence of religious thought, particularly in Christian Europe. The Catholic Church played a significant role in developing the concept of fairness through the doctrine of natural law. This belief held that every person, regardless of their status, was entitled to fairness and justice simply because they were human. This idea of fairness was grounded in the belief that all humans possess an inherent dignity given by God, and therefore deserve to be treated justly. This concept spread across Europe, shaping laws and social practices for centuries. In this view, fairness wasn't only about distributing resources, it was about moral obligations and universal rights. The Catholic theologian Thomas Aquinas expanded on this, blending Aristotle's views with Christian theology. He argued that natural law, which includes fairness, is accessible to all people through reason and is essential for the common good. Aquinas' work influenced legal systems in Europe and continues to echo in modern discussions about human rights and social justice. By the time we reached the Enlightenment, the concept of fairness had further evolved. Thinkers like John Locke and Immanuel Kant argued that fairness was not just a social ideal, but an intrinsic part of human nature. Locke believed that fairness, especially in terms of property rights and governance, was a fundamental natural right, something that governments should protect at all costs. For Locke, fairness meant ensuring that individuals were not deprived of their life, liberty, or property without just cause. His writings would go on to influence modern democratic principles, including the belief in equality before the law. Kant, on the other hand, argued that fairness was a matter of duty and moral law. He believed in what he called the categorical imperative, which instructed people to act in ways they would want others to act toward them, a universal standard of fairness. The Enlightenment solidified fairness as a central principle in discussions about justice, human rights, and morality. It also laid the groundwork for modern legal systems and democratic institutions. Fairness in the modern world. In today's world, fairness remains a multifaceted concept. It touches every aspect of our lives, from how laws are applied in courts to how opportunities are distributed in schools and workplaces. But defining fairness isn't always straightforward. In many fields, including philosophy, psychology, sociology, and economics, fairness is understood as treating individuals and groups equitably without discrimination or bias. Psychologists, for instance, have studied how even young children possess a basic sense of fairness. Research shows that by the age of 2, children already react negatively when they perceive that resources, like toys, are being distributed unfairly. This suggests that fairness may be an innate human quality, something we are hardwired to understand from a very early age. However, fairness is not always universally agreed upon. Cultural perspectives on fairness can differ greatly. What might seem fair in one society could be perceived as unfair in another. This subjectivity makes fairness a complex idea that often requires negotiation and compromise.